Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Adam Gray's fingers tightened around his crystal tumbler as he watched Catherine laugh at another of Nicholas Watt's supposedly brilliant observations about Renaissance art. The sound grated against his nerves, too bright, too eager. Nothing like the controlled chuckle she usually reserved for their social gatherings. "The brushwork technique is unmistakable," Nicholas declared, gesturing with his wine glass. "Most collectors wouldn't catch it, but that's why authentication requires such meticulous attention to detail." Harold Gray, seated at the head of the mahogany dining table, nodded appreciatively. "Fascinating, Nicholas. The museum is fortunate to have someone with your expertise." Adam took another sip of his scotch, letting the amber liquid burn away the acid taste in his mouth. At 43, he had mastered the art of the pleasant facade, a skill that served him well both as a financial advisor at Preston and Associates and as the supposed patriarch of this Sunday dinner charade. "Catherine mentioned you authenticated 3 new pieces this month," Adam said, his voice carrying just enough interest to maintain his role as the engaged host. "Quite productive." Nicholas' eyes flickered to Catherine for a fraction of a second before he smiled. "Your wife's curatorial instincts are remarkable. She has an eye for potential that makes my job significantly easier." "Among other talents," Harold added, raising his glass in Catherine's direction. The gesture seemed innocent enough, but something in his father's tone made Adam's skin prickle. Catherine touched Nicholas' arm as she stood. "Let me show you the Caravaggio prints I was telling you about. They're in the study." "The study's being renovated," Adam reminded her, watching their body language with growing unease. "Oh, right." Catherine recovered smoothly. "My office, then. They'll need your opinion before we consider them for the Renaissance exhibition." As they left the dining room, Tricia Lynn's warnings about the financial discrepancies echoed in Adam's mind. His assistant had approached him 3 times in the past month, each time more insistent about irregular patterns in his personal accounts. "More scotch, son." Harold's voice cut through his thoughts. Adam studied his father's face, searching for something. 10 years had passed since his mother's death, but the questions surrounding it still nagged at him. The rushed cremation, against her explicit wishes for burial beside her parents, had sparked the first real argument between father and son. "I should check on the kids' school accounts," Adam said, standing. "The tuition payments are due soon." Harold's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his wine glass. "Catherine handles all that, doesn't she?" "Through the trust. Time I took a more active role in the finances," Adam replied, maintaining eye contact until his father looked away. In his home office, Adam pulled up the latest bank statements. The numbers confirmed Tricia's concerns: large transfers disguised as art acquisitions and educational expenses, but the timing didn't align with either the museum's purchasing schedule or the children's school terms. A soft laugh drifted through the window, drawing his attention to the garden below. Catherine and Nicholas stood too close together, their profiles illuminated by the patio lights. As Adam watched, Nicholas brushed a strand of hair from Catherine's face, an intimately familiar gesture that sent ice through Adam's veins. The next morning, Adam arrived at his office earlier than usual. Tricia was already at her desk, her efficiency one of the reasons he'd kept her as his assistant for over a decade. "Mr. Gray," she straightened in her chair, "I've compiled those account summaries you requested." "Show me everything," he ordered, closing his office door. "From the beginning." Tricia spread the documents across his desk. "The pattern started roughly 15 years ago. Small transfers at first, then larger ones coinciding with your children's births." She hesitated. "There's something else. The trust fund your father established. It has unusual terms." Adam scanned the trust documents, his jaw tightening. "Control transfers to an unnamed third party when the children turn 18. Your signature appears on the authorization," Tricia pointed out carefully. "But the handwriting isn't mine." Adam's voice was deadly quiet. "Pull my mother's death certificate and find out everything you can about Nicholas Watt's movements in and out of Newford over the past 15 years. Sir, Tricia cleared her throat. You should know. I tried to trace his employment history at the Lake City Institute of Art. The records are inconsistent. It's as if someone created a paper trail after the fact. Adam's phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Contractor found water damage behind the study walls. Needs to open them up. Okay to proceed. He typed back. Do what's necessary. The renovation had been Catherine's idea, pushed through despite his objections about the timing. Now, watching the pieces fall into place, Adam felt a cold clarity descend. Tricia, he said, his tone making her look up sharply. Get me everything on Martin Burns' legal work for the family, and find out who handled my mother's cremation arrangements. Mr. Gray. Tricia hesitated. There's a nurse, Renee Yao. She assisted with all 5 of your children's births. She left the hospital abruptly after trying to raise concerns about discrepancies in the medical records. Find her, Adam commanded, whatever it costs. That evening, Adam entered his study, noting the plastic sheeting and exposed walls with new interest. Catherine was at another late exhibition planning meeting, and Harold had taken the contractor's call personally, insisting on overseeing the renovation details himself. Moving along the walls, Adam found it behind a section of partially removed paneling, a hidden compartment recently disturbed, judging by the dust patterns inside. Wrapped in acid-free paper lay a leather-bound diary and a stack of photographs. The first photo stopped his breath. Catherine and Nicholas at a carnival, dated 2 years before Nicholas' supposed arrival in Lake City. Behind it, medical records and birth certificates told a story that turned his world to ash. The diary entry was in Catherine's handwriting. My love, all 5 kids are yours. The fool even paid for their expensive boarding schools. Harold's been incredible, keeping our secret all these years. He loves the children as his own grandchildren, more than he ever loved Adam as a son. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how alive you make me feel. How dead I was in my marriage before you came along. Adam's hand curled into a fist, crumpling the page. The sound of a car in the driveway pulled him back to the present. He carefully replaced everything except 1 photo and 1 page of medical records, then stepped back into the shadows of his study. Catherine's heels clicked on the marble foyer. Adam, you home? In the study, he called out, his voice perfectly controlled. She appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed from more than just the autumn air. The contractor saw. Sit down, Catherine. His tone made her freeze. Tell me about the carnival in Sea Haven. The one from 2 years before Nicholas transferred from Lake City. The color drained from her face. What are you? 15 years. Adam cut her off. 5 children. All those convenient art authentication conferences. He placed the photo on his desk. Did you and my father laugh about it? The perfect plan to fool the trusting husband while stealing his fortune. Adam, please. Catherine started to rise. Sit down. His voice could have frozen hell itself. You're going to tell me everything about the trust fund, about my mother's death, about Harold's role in all of it. And then he smiled, an expression that made her shrink back into her chair. You're going to watch while I tear your perfectly constructed world apart. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 15 years of lies. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice barely a whisper. What are you going to do? Adam leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. I'm going to destroy you, Catherine. You, Nicholas, my father. Everyone who thought they could play me for a fool. But first, I'm going to make you confess. Every detail, every lie, every single betrayal. And as the night deepened around them, Catherine began to talk, unraveling the elaborate deception that had defined Adam Gray's life for the past 15 years. The renovation crew arrived early the next morning, their tools creating a percussive backdrop to Adam's investigation. He had spent the night in his private office at Preston & Associates, analyzing years of financial records with Tricia's help. Mr. Gray, Tricia entered with a fresh stack of documents. I found Renee Yao. Adam looked up from his computer. Where? working at a private clinic in Allendale. She agreed to meet, but only off the record. Tricia placed a detailed background report on his desk. She's afraid of your father's influence. Book it for today. Use cash. No paper trail. Adam turned back to his screen. What about Martin? Your brother-in-law's billing records show regular payments from a shell company, traced back to Nicholas Watts. The payments began 3 months before your mother's death. Adam's hand stilled over the keyboard. Show me. The evidence was damning. Martin Byrne, Catherine's younger brother and the family's legal advisor, had been on Nicholas' payroll for years. The payments coincided with major life events: his mother's death, each child's birth, the trust fund's creation. 2 hours later, Adam sat across from Renee Yao in a quiet coffee shop in Allendale. The former nurse clutched her cup with trembling hands. I tried to tell them, she said, her voice barely audible. The blood types. They were impossible, given your medical profile. But Dr. Franklin said Harold Gray had personally vouched for the record's accuracy. Tell me about the births. Adam commanded softly. Your father was present for each one. He would arrive before the delivery, spend time alone with the records. Renee swallowed hard. There was a man who visited afterward, when Catherine thought you had gone home. He looked like the children. Nicholas Watts. Renee nodded. The last time, with the twins, I threatened to report the discrepancies. The next day, Harold Gray was in my supervisor's office. I was transferred to the maintenance department, then laid off 3 months later. You kept record. Everything. She reached into her bag, withdrawing a thick envelope. I knew someday someone would need to know the truth. Back at his office, Adam spread out Renee's documents alongside the items from the hidden compartment. The story they told made his blood boil. A conspiracy spanning decades, orchestrated by his own father. A knock interrupted his analysis. Come in. Detective Anthony Moran entered, looking uncomfortable. Adam, what's this about Lillian's death? Sit down, Anthony. Adam's voice was icy. Tell me why you convinced Diana to keep quiet about seeing Catherine with Nicholas in Shiloh. The detective's face paled. How did you? I have the hotel receipts. The same week you received a substantial deposit from a numbered account. Harold's account. Adam, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. Adam's voice was lethal silk. Explain why my best friend helped cover up my wife's affair. Explain why a decorated detective ignored evidence about my mother's suspicious death. Anthony slumped in his chair. Harold said it would destroy you. Learning about Catherine and Nicholas. He said Lillian's death was an accident. She was distraught, unstable. The evidence was circumstantial. Show me the case file. It was sealed. Harold used his influence. Unseal it. Adam's tone left no room for argument, or I release everything I have on the payoffs. That evening, Adam visited the family mausoleum where his mother should have been laid to rest. The grandiose structure stood as a monument to the Gray family legacy, a legacy built on lies. His phone buzzed, a message from Catherine. Where are you? We need to talk about the children. Adam's reply was concise. Nothing to discuss. They're not mine. Her response came quickly. They love you. You're the only father they've known. Like Harold was the only father I knew. He typed back. How convenient that he helped hide his grandchildren's true parentage. His phone rang. Harold. Adam let it go to voicemail, instead dialing Tricia. Sir, execute the transfers we discussed, and contact Charlotte Addison and Bethany Cole. Tell them I'm interested in their gallery chain. Their financial situation is precarious. Tricia warned. Perfect. Adam smiled grimly. Have my jet ready tomorrow. It's time to become Isaac Maguire. A final text arrived from Catherine. Please, let me explain, for the children's sake. Adam read it twice, remembering the diary entries detailing how she and Nicholas had planned each pregnancy around his business trips, how they had laughed at his pride in children who shared none of his DNA, how Harold had orchestrated it all. perhaps as revenge for loving Lillian more than he loved his own son. His response was simple. You should have thought about the children before you and Nicholas decided to make me raise them as my own. Give my regards to my father. I'm sure he'll be relieved to finally acknowledge his real grandchildren. The safe deposit box yielded one final devastating piece of evidence: Lillian Gray's personal diary. Adam sat in the bank's private viewing room, his mother's last words burning into his consciousness. Harold knows about Catherine and Nicholas. I confronted him today. The look in his eyes terrified me. He said I didn't understand, that some things are better left buried. But how can I stay silent? Adam deserves to know the truth about his wife, about the children. The entry was dated 3 days before her fatal fall. Adam's phone vibrated. A text from Detective Moran. Emmy's original report found signs of struggle, inconsistent with accident. Harold's signature on cremation order dated before time of death. Another message followed. Security footage from hospital missing. Harold on hospital board when archives were digitized. Keep digging, Adam replied. I want everything. At Preston and Associates, Tricia had compiled a timeline of Nicholas authenticated artworks. The pattern was clear. Pieces authenticated during his conferences in Newford consistently sold for far above market value. The Lake City Institute has no record of him in their authentication department, Tricia reported. But I found this. She handed him a newspaper clipping. Nicholas Watts named in an authentication scandal. Charges mysteriously dropped after key evidence disappeared. Contact Paula Reyes, Adam instructed, referring to the former FBI Art Crimes Division agent. Tell her I have information about the Lake City case. Already done. She's willing to meet, Tricia said, then hesitated. There's more. I traced the trust fund transfers. Harold's been siphoning money from your mother's inheritance to fund it. Adam's expression hardened. How much? Millions. The fund is structured to transfer to Nicholas' control when the children turn 18. A knock interrupted them. Martin Burns stood in the doorway, his usual polished demeanor cracking around the edges. We need to talk, Catherine's brother said. About what? Adam's voice was cold. The payments from Nicholas, or my mother's convenient cremation. Martin blanched. You don't understand. Then enlighten me. Adam gestured to a chair. Explain why my wife's brother helped hide her affair and my mother's murder. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Martin sank into the chair. Harold approached me about handling some private legal matters. Said it was to protect the family reputation. By falsifying birth records, creating a trust fund to steal your children's inheritance. The trust was Harold's idea. He said it was insurance in case you ever discovered. Martin trailed off. In case I discovered my entire life was a lie. Adam leaned forward. Tell me about my mother's death. She found Catherine's letters to Nicholas, threatened to expose everything. Martin wouldn't meet his eyes. Harold said he'd handle it. I didn't know. I never thought. You never thought what? Adam's voice cut like a blade. That helping cover up my mother's death might have consequences. Martin's face crumpled. She wasn't supposed to die. Harold said he'd convince her to keep quiet. When I heard about the fall, he buried his face in his hands. I helped with the cremation paperwork. Harold said it was necessary to protect everyone. Protect everyone. Adam stood, looming over his brother-in-law, or protect your sister's perfect life with her lover. Catherine was young when she met Nicholas, Martin defended weakly. They had a connection. Spare me the romance story, Adam snapped. You helped them deceive me for 15 years, used your legal expertise to create false documents, hide financial transactions, and cover up a death. Tricia entered with a fresh stack of papers. Sir, the analysis of Harold's investment records is complete. You'll want to see this. The documents revealed another layer of betrayal. Harold had been using Adam's financial expertise to help Nicholas build his art authentication business, funneling profits through offshore accounts. Get out, Adam ordered Martin, but don't leave town. When this breaks, you'll want that immunity deal you're going to negotiate with the DA. After Martin fled, Adam turned to Tricia. What did you find on Joanne Wright, former senior conservator at the museum? Tricia consulted her notes. She opposed Nicholas' hiring, cited concerns about his authentication methods, was transferred to the West Coast Division shortly after. Transfer documents, signed by the board after Harold made a substantial donation to the museum's endowment fund. Adam's phone lit up with another text, from Catherine. This time, the children are asking about you. Please come home. Home. The word tasted like ashes. The Victorian mansion he'd bought for their family was just another prop in their elaborate deception. He thought of the children at their boarding schools, none of them sharing his brown eyes or his mother's auburn hair. Catherine's explanations about family genetics now revealed as carefully crafted lies. Sir, Tricia's voice pulled him back. Detective Moran sent the complete autopsy photos, and I have Diana Moran on line 1. Adam picked up the phone. Diana. I should have told you, his best friend's wife burst out. When I saw them at the hotel, James, Anthony, said exposing it would destroy too many lives. That Harold had proof of Catherine's affair, but was handling it privately to protect the family name. When was this? 3 years ago, the weekend of the museum's donor gala. Diana's voice cracked. Catherine was wearing the sapphire necklace you'd given her for your anniversary. Another piece clicked into place, the necklace she claimed to have lost months later. The insurance payout that had mysteriously never been processed. Thank you, Diana, Adam said quietly. You've been more honest than my own family. He hung up and turned to Tricia. Prepare the documents we discussed, all of them, and contact Charlotte Addison and Bethany Cole about their gallery chain. Already done. They're eager to meet with Isaac Maguire about a potential investment. Tricia paused. Are you sure about this? Adam stood at his office window, watching the city below. Somewhere out there, his wife and her lover were probably celebrating another successful deception. His father was likely orchestrating more ways to control the fortune that should have been his children's inheritance, children who had never been his. My mother wrote that some things are better left buried, he said finally. She was wrong. It's time to dig up everything they tried to hide. Every lie, every betrayal, every criminal act they committed while playing their roles in this farce of a family. It will destroy them, Tricia observed. Yes, Adam agreed, his voice hard with resolve. It will. Tricia Lynn stared at the passport in her hands. The name Isaac Maguire stared back, accompanied by a photo of Adam Gray with subtle alterations. Graying temples, different hairstyle, rimless glasses. The documentation is perfect, she said, examining the associated papers. But what about digital footprints? Already handled, Adam replied, reviewing files on his laptop. Isaac Maguire has a master's in finance from Edinburgh, 10 years of private banking experience in London, and a particular interest in art market investments. They sat in a private office suite in Stratford, far from Newford's prying eyes. The space, rented under a shell corporation, had become their war room. The trust fund transfer records are concerning, Tricia noted, gesturing to her screen. Harold's been moving larger amounts recently. He's getting nervous. Adam's voice held cold satisfaction. The Christmas dinner plan will push him over the edge. The DNA test results lay on the desk between them, accompanied by detailed medical records and birth certificates. Next to them sat a thick folder containing evidence of Harold's involvement in Lillian Gray's death. Detective Moran called again, Tricia reported. He's wavering. Send him the first package, Adam commanded. Let him see what his silence has protected all these years. A knock interrupted them. Paula Rise entered, her investigative training evident in her precise movements. Your father's been making inquiries about offshore accounts. He's trying to trace the money. Good. Adam smiled without warmth. Let him chase shadows while we dismantle his empire. Paula spread photographs across the desk. Surveillance shots of Nicholas at various galleries, meeting with known art fraud suspects. He's getting sloppy. The Lake City scandal wasn't his first brush with fraud accusations. Tell me about the Addison Cole sisters, Adam requested. Charlotte Addison and Bethany Cole inherited their gallery chain from their father, Peter Cole. Nicholas authenticated a Rembrandt for him. Turned out to be fake. The scandal bankrupted Cole. He died of a heart attack 3 months later. And now their galleries are struggling on paper, Paula confirmed. But I've traced a pattern of legitimate authentications through smaller independent experts. They're building a clean portfolio behind the scenes. Adam nodded appreciatively. Smart women. Set up a meeting. Already done. They're eager to meet the mysterious Isaac Maguire, Paula said, then paused. There's more. Nicholas has been approaching other galleries, looking for authentication contracts. He's burning through cash faster than usual. Catherine's getting greedy. Tricia observed. The museum salary can't support their lifestyle anymore. No, Adam agreed. But desperation makes people careless. What about the children? All 5 remain at their boarding schools, Tricia reported. Catherine's been making weekly deposits to their accounts, money traced back to recent art sales. Sales authenticated by Nicholas, Paula added. The prices are inflated by at least 40%. Adam's phone buzzed. A message from Harold. Son, we need to talk about your mother's estate. He's panicking. Adam noted with satisfaction. Tricia, proceed with the asset liquidation. Paula, get me everything on Nicholas Lake City operations. It's time to turn up the heat. The next morning, Isaac Maguire made his first official appearance, touring the Addison Cole flagship gallery in Stratford. The authentication process is our primary concern, Charlotte Addison explained, leading him through the exhibition space. Recent market volatility has made buyers cautious. Understandable, Isaac replied, examining a Renaissance piece. Especially after the Cole-Watts scandal. Bethany Cole's head snapped up. You know about that. I make it my business to know market history. Isaac adjusted his glasses. Your father's reputation for integrity was well known in European circles. The sisters exchanged glances. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private, Charlotte suggested. In their office, Bethany poured 3 glasses of scotch. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Maguire? A partnership, Isaac replied smoothly. Your galleries have an impeccable provenance verification system, combined with proper capitalization. He let the implication hang. We've had other offers, Charlotte noted, from Nicholas Watts, perhaps. Isaac watched their reactions. Through intermediaries, of course. How did you? Bethany started. The same way I know about the independent authentications you've been quietly accumulating. Isaac sipped his scotch. Smart move, building a clean portfolio. Charlotte leaned forward. What's your real interest here, Mr. Maguire? Let's say I have a personal stake in seeing certain fraudulent practices exposed. He placed a file on their desk. This might interest you. The sisters reviewed the documents. Evidence linking Nicholas to multiple authentication scandals, including their father's case. Why show us this? Bethany demanded. Because you understand the value of patience, Isaac said, of building a case so strong it can't be buried by connections or money. Isaac stood. Consider my offer. I'll be in touch. Back in his temporary office, Adam reviewed the day's developments with his team. The sisters are intrigued, Paula reported. They've already started background checks on Isaac Maguire. They won't find anything concerning, Tricia assured them. The identity is ironclad. What about the Christmas dinner preparations? Adam asked. All arranged, Paula confirmed. The DNA results will arrive during dessert. Detective Moran is prepared to act on the evidence about Lillian's death. Adam's phone lit up with another message from Catherine. The children ask about you. Please come home. He deleted it without responding. On his desk, Lillian's diary lay open to her final entry. Harold says some things are better left buried. But the truth has a way of surfacing, doesn't it? Like bodies in a river. Sir, Tricia interrupted his thoughts. Harold's trying to access the trust fund. He's encountered our blocks. Right on schedule, Adam murmured. Proceed with Phase 2. Nicholas Watts paced his office at the Newford Museum of Fine Arts, phone pressed to his ear. The authentication has to hold up, Martin. The buyers are asking questions. The paperwork is solid, Martin Byrne assured him. But Harold's behavior is concerning. He's been drinking, talking about Lillian. Handle it, Nicholas snapped. That's what we pay you for. The office door opened, and Catherine entered, her face tight with worry. Nicholas, we need to talk. He ended the call. What's wrong? Harold's new wife, Anita Mahoney Gray, that opportunistic snake, has been recording his drunken ramblings about Lillian, about us, about the children. Nicholas frowned. How do you know? Martin overheard her on the phone with her lawyer. She's building insurance in case Harold tries to cut her out of his will. Nicholas swore softly. First Adam disappears. Now this. The timing. He knows something, Catherine whispered. He has too. The way he vanished, right after the renovation started. The hidden compartment was empty. Nicholas, we checked. Then why hasn't he touched his accounts? Why won't he answer calls from the children? Before Nicholas could respond, his phone buzzed. An email from the Lake City Institute of Art, inquiring about authentication records from his supposed tenure there. Problems? Catherine asked, noting his expression. Nothing serious, he lied smoothly. How are the children handling everything? Allison's asking questions about the authentication processes, about your background. Catherine sank into a chair. She's too smart for her own good, like her father. Don't, Nicholas muttered. Don't talk about him. At his care facility, Harold Gray stared at his bank statements in disbelief. The transfers were denied. How is that possible? Anita Mahoney Gray placed a calming hand on his shoulder while activating the recording app on her phone. Tell me again about Lillian, darling, about the night she fell. She didn't fall, Harold slurred, reaching for his whiskey. She knew too much, about Catherine and Nicholas, about the children. She was going to tell Adam everything. Anita's fingers tightened on her phone. What happened that night? I tried to reason with her, told her some things are better left buried. But Lillian, she was always so righteous. Like Adam, Harold's voice broke. My son, what have I done to my son? In her dorm room at boarding school, Allison Gray researched authentication methodologies on her laptop. Her mother's latest email sat unanswered in her inbox. Please call. We're worried about you. A notification popped up. Another anonymous tip about Nicholas' authentication practices have been uploaded to the art fraud investigation database. Allison smiled grimly as she added her own documentation to the growing file. Her phone buzzed. A text from the siblings' group chat. The twins, Connor and Lily, were planning to study abroad next semester. Can't stay here, Lily wrote. Too many lies. At the police station, Detective Anthony Moran reviewed the latest evidence package that had arrived anonymously. Photos of Lillian Gray's original autopsy, witness statements that had been suppressed, Harold's signatures on cremation orders dated before her death. His wife, Diana, entered his office. Anthony, you have to do something. This isn't going away. I know. He stared at the files. I should have listened to you years ago about Catherine and Nicholas. It's not too late to do the right thing, she urged. A knock interrupted them. Camilla Howe, the museum's new director, stood in the doorway. Detective Moran, we need to talk about some irregularities in our authentication records. Meanwhile, Martin Byrne sat in his law office, surrounded by incriminating documents. Years of falsified records, backdated contracts, suspicious death certificates. He kept copies of everything, insurance against the day it all unraveled. His phone rang. Nicholas again. The Lake City inquiry, Nicholas demanded without preamble. Handle it. It's not that simple anymore, Martin replied. Things are unraveling, Nicholas. Harold's drinking, talking too much. Anita's recording everything. Then discredit her, Nicholas snapped. That's your job. No, Martin said quietly. Not anymore. I'm done cleaning up your messes. He ended the call and opened his safe, removing a thick file labeled insurance. Inside lay years of evidence against Nicholas and Catherine, carefully preserved for this moment. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Ready to make things right. Reply if interested. Martin stared at the message for a long moment before typing. Yes. The Addison Cole Gallery boardroom buzzed with anticipation. Art fraud investigators from Interpol, the FBI, and Scotland Yard sat interspersed among the shareholders, their presence concealed behind careful disguises. Charlotte Addison tapped her pen against her notepad, watching Nicholas Watts approach the podium. His confident stride betrayed no awareness of the trap about to spring shut. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas began, our bid to acquire the Addison Cole Gallery chain represents a unique opportunity. Perhaps, a voice cut through the room, we should discuss your previous acquisition opportunities, Mr. Watts. The Lake City scandal, for instance. Isaac Maguire rose from his seat, removing his glasses. The room fell silent as his true features emerged. Adam Gray stood before them, his face carved from granite. Or shall we discuss the Rembrandt authentication that destroyed Peter Cole? He turned to face Nicholas directly. Though personally, I'm more interested in talking about my mother's death. Nicholas' facade cracked. Adam, that's not possible. Catherine gasped from her seat. You disappeared. Did you really think I'd just walk away? Adam's voice could have frozen flame. While you and my father stole my children's inheritance to fund your latest fraud. Harold Gray, seated in the front row, clutched his chest. Son, don't call me that. Adam's words cut like razors. You lost that right when you helped murder my mother. Paula Ray stood, badge gleaming. Nicholas Watts, you're under investigation for multiple counts of art fraud, financial crimes, and conspiracy related to Lillian Gray's death. Martin Byrne emerged from the side door, carrying a thick portfolio. I have the documentation here. Falsified records, backdated contracts, evidence of Harold's involvement in covering up Lillian's death. You traitor, Catherine hissed at her brother. No, Catherine. Martin's voice shook. We're the traitors. All of us. We watched Adam raise Nicholas' children while helping you steal his fortune. Harold's face had turned gray. His new wife, Anita, reached for her phone, likely to delete her recordings of his drunken confessions. Don't bother, Adam told her coldly. We already have copies. Detective Morin stepped forward, warrant in hand. Harold Gray, you're under arrest for conspiracy and accessory after the fact in the death of Lillian Gray. Harold clutched his chest harder, slumping in his chair, as chaos erupted. Adam's voice cut through the noise. Did you think I wouldn't find out? He advanced on Nicholas and Catherine. That I wouldn't piece it together. The carefully timed pregnancies, the trust fund transfers, the artwork authentications that paid for my children's education. They're my children, Nicholas snarled. No. Adam's smile was terrifying in its calmness. They're victims of your fraud, just like I was. But unlike me, they've chosen to fight back. Isn't that right, Allison? Their oldest daughter stood from her place among the shareholders. The anonymous tips about Nicholas' authentication fraud, those came from me. I've been documenting everything. Catherine's face crumpled. Allison, how could you? How could I? Allison's laugh was bitter. How could you? You made me question everything I thought I knew about family, about truth. So I learned to authenticate truth for myself. Paramedics rushed in to attend to Harold, who had collapsed fully now. Anita hovered nearby, her schemes of blackmail evaporating as Adam's team moved to secure the evidence. Mr. Gray, Charlotte Addison called out. Perhaps you'd like to share the real numbers behind Mr. Watt's attempted gallery acquisition. Adam nodded to Tricia, who projected financial records onto the screen. Money stolen from my mother's estate, funneled through fraudulent art sales, used to finance a hostile takeover. Did I miss anything, Nicholas? You can't prove. Nicholas began. Actually, Paula interrupted, we can prove all of it. Your authentication fraud in Lake City, the real reason Joanne Wright was transferred, the truth about Lillian Gray's death, Harold's role in the cover-up. Detective Morin stepped forward again. Catherine Byrne Gray, Nicholas Watts, you're both under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and financial crimes. As they were led away in handcuffs, Catherine turned back. Adam, please, the children will learn what their parents really are. He cut her off. Frauds, thieves, and conspirators in my mother's death. That's your legacy, Catherine. Not the perfect family you pretended to build. Martin approached cautiously. The immunity deal is valid. Adam confirmed. In exchange for your complete testimony about Harold's involvement in my mother's death. The paramedics wheeled Harold out on a stretcher, Anita trailing behind. The old man's eyes locked with his son's one final time, pleading silently for forgiveness. Adam turned away. Allison, he addressed his oldest, you've done good work. I learned from the best, she replied quietly, even if I didn't know it was you behind the investigation. The room gradually emptied, leaving Adam with his team. Charlotte and Bethany approached with contracts in hand. The gallery chain is yours, Charlotte stated, as agreed. No, Adam corrected. It's ours. Together, we'll build something honest. Something that would make your father proud. Outside, reporters gathered as news of the arrests spread. Adam Gray had returned from the dead, and with him came the destruction of Newford's greatest art fraud conspiracy. The Newford Museum's boardroom crackled with tension as Camilla Howe presented her findings. The audit reveals systematic fraud in our authentication department. Works valued at over $100 million have questionable provenance. Board member Richard Phillips mopped his brow. This will destroy us. No. Adam spoke from the doorway. It will cleanse you. Heads turned as he entered, Tricia and Allison flanking him. The 3 months since the shareholders' meeting had transformed the museum's landscape. Mr. Gray, Camilla acknowledged, your timing is perfect. I was just explaining how deep the corruption went. Show them, Adam commanded. Tricia distributed documents detailing each fraudulent authentication, each inflated sale, each corrupted transaction that had flowed through the museum's reputation. The museum's standing can be salvaged, Allison added, but only through complete transparency. And who are you to make such claims? Phillips demanded. My daughter, Adam stated flatly, who had the courage to expose her own parents' crimes. The room fell silent. Allison stepped forward, presenting her own documentation. I've developed new authentication protocols, incorporating multiple independent verifications. The Addison Cole Gallery has already implemented them successfully. The press will crucify us, another board member protested. The press already knows, Camilla countered, thanks to Catherine's published confession. In her prison cell, Catherine had indeed begun writing a detailed account of the conspiracy that had claimed Lillian Gray's life and nearly destroyed her family's legacy. I did it for love, she had written. At least, that's what I told myself. But Nicholas never loved me. He loved what I could give him. Access, legitimacy, a family man's reputation to hide behind while he built his fraud empire. The confession had blown open the art world's darkest corners. Galleries and collectors across 3 continents faced scrutiny as the web of fraud unraveled. In her office at the newly reformed Addison Cole Gallery, Tricia reviewed the latest forensic accounting reports. Her warnings about financial discrepancies, once ignored, had laid the groundwork for exposing the entire scheme. The immunity deals are processing, Paula Rice reported, entering with fresh files. Martin's testimony about Harold's role in Lillian's death is devastating. Good, Tricia signed another document. How's Allison handling everything? Better than expected. She's turned her pain into purpose. The new authentication standards she's developing with Charlotte and Bethany are revolutionary. The door opened as Adam entered, reviewing reports on his tablet. The twins called. Connor and Lily. They're staying in Easternland for now. They need time. They need truth, Tricia observed. He corrected. They need the truth that was hidden from them all these years. At the prison, Detective Morin conducted another interview with Nicholas. The former authenticator's arrogance had crumbled as evidence mounted. Harold approached me first, Nicholas admitted. Said his son was too soft, too honest for the art world. That Catherine deserved someone who understood ambition. And Lillian Gray, Morin pressed. Nicholas looked away. She found Catherine's letters, threatened to expose everything. Harold said he'd handle it. By pushing her down the stairs, Morin finished, then rushing the cremation to hide evidence. I never wanted. Save it for the judge. Morin cut him off. Your children already know the truth. Back at the gallery, Allison worked late into the night, analyzing authentication techniques. The door opened quietly. You should rest, Adam said. Says the man who spent 11 years planning his revenge, she replied without looking up. Justice, he corrected. Your grandmother deserved that much. Allison said, finally facing him. Why didn't you tell me when you first discovered? Would you have believed me over the parents who raised you? I believed in evidence, she stated, just like you taught me, even if I didn't know it was you teaching. 1 year after the shareholders' meeting, the Addison Cole Gallery hosted its first major exhibition under new management. The guest list read like a who's who of the art world, drawn by the gallery's revolutionary authentication standards. Your father would be proud, Adam told Charlotte and Bethany as they prepared for opening. He'd be prouder of this, Charlotte replied, revealing the inaugural scholarship recipient, Renee Yo's daughter, studying art authentication and fraud prevention. The Lillian Gray Foundation's first public ceremony celebrated more than just scholarships. It marked the implementation of new industry standards, developed by Allison in partnership with the gallery. My grandmother died protecting the truth. Allison addressed the audience. Our new protocols ensure no other family suffers that fate. In the audience, Adam Gray, now in his 60s, watched his oldest daughter with quiet pride. His hair had turned completely silver, but his brown eyes remained as sharp as ever. The Addison Cole Gallery empire he built with Charlotte and Bethany had expanded to 15 locations across 3 continents, each one a beacon of authentication integrity. After the speech, Allison joined him at his table. The new scanning technology is ready for implementation, she reported. We can detect forgeries at the molecular level now. Your grandmother would be impressed, Adam replied. She fought for truth with handwritten letters and personal diaries. We fight with quantum spectroscopy. Speaking of fighting, Allison hesitated. Catherine's parole hearing is next month. Adam's face hardened. 20 years hadn't softened his stance toward his ex-wife, who had served 18 years for her role in the conspiracy. Her prison diary had become a cautionary tale taught in art ethics courses worldwide. Will you attend? He asked. Connor and Lily want me to. Allison answered, referring to her younger siblings. They've been visiting her regularly since they turned 30. The twins had forged their own paths in Easternland. Connor had become a prominent art restorer in Belmont, his work focused on preserving historical accuracy rather than market value. Lily taught art history in Windsworth, particularly focusing on authentication scandals and their impact on cultural heritage. And the others? Adam asked. Ryan's still in Newford, running the Foundation's educational programs. Natalie's in Shiloh with her gallery. They haven't spoken to Catherine since the trial. The middle children had chosen complete separation from their biological parents. Ryan Gray had thrown himself into protecting other families from art fraud, while Natalie had opened her own gallery specializing in emerging artists with rigorous authentication standards. Her mother's death had brought closure, but also fresh pain. Detective Moran's investigation led to Harold's indictment as an accessory, though his health prevented a full trial. Anita's recorded confessions provided key evidence, though she had tried desperately to destroy them. Her attempt to profit from Harold's guilt became another brick in the wall of evidence. In the end, Adam's revenge accomplished more than personal justice. It sparked an industry-wide reformation, created new standards for authentication, and established safeguards against future fraud. The price had been high. Family bonds broken, trust shattered, lives destroyed. But from those ashes rose something stronger, a legacy of truth that would endure long after the pain of betrayal faded. "We're not defined by biology," Adam told Allison during their last gallery opening. "We're defined by our choices, our commitment to truth." She nodded, understanding the weight of that legacy. "That's what grandmother died protecting. What you spent 11 years avenging. What we'll spend our lives preserving." The Lillian Gray Foundation's motto, carved in stone above its entrance, said it all. Truth endures. It was Lillian's final gift to them all, a legacy of honesty that would outlive the lies that claimed her life. 20 years later, Allison Gray stood at the podium of the Lillian Gray Foundation's 20th anniversary gala, commanding attention from the assembled art world elite. At 45, she carried herself with the same analytical precision that had revolutionized art authentication 2 decades ago. 20 years ago, my grandmother's death exposed corruption that threatened to destroy the art world's integrity, she addressed the crowd. Today, we celebrate not just her memory, but the systems her sacrifice inspired. In the audience, Adam Gray watched his daughter with quiet pride. The Addison Cole Gallery empire he built with Charlotte and Bethany had expanded further, each location a beacon of authentication integrity. After the speech, Allison joined him. "The new quantum scanning technology is ready," she said. "We can detect forgeries at the molecular level." "Your grandmother would be proud," Adam replied. "She fought for truth with diaries. Now we fight with scientific precision." Speaking of truth, Allison hesitated. Catherine's parole hearing approaches. Connor and Lily intend to go. "Do you think they'll forgive her?" Adam asked. "They're searching for closure," Allison said simply. "Not forgiveness, just understanding." Elsewhere, Ryan was expanding the Foundation's educational program, opening centers in Himora and Ruhale. Natalie's gallery thrived in Shiloh, championing emerging artists under the highest authentication standards. Every child had found a path that honored the truth hidden from them so long. Adam's phone buzzed. A message from Martin Byrne. The firm in compliance for the new center in Ruhale had identified 3 more forgery attempts that morning alone. "The system works," he noted with satisfaction. "Because you made it work," Allison replied. "You could have just destroyed them, Catherine, Nicholas, Harold, but you built something lasting." "I built it for you," Adam corrected gently. "All of you." So the Lillian Gray Foundation continued to expand, its authentication protocols protecting billions in art transactions annually. Its educational programs trained hundreds of specialists. Its legal team prosecuted art fraud cases on every continent. Allison's evolving technology caught forgeries daily, ensuring truth remained the guiding principle of the art world. Standing before Lillian's portrait in the Foundation's headquarters, Adam reflected that revenge had given him something unexpected, not just justice, but a family bound by choice rather than blood, united in their commitment to truth. It was a legacy Lillian would have cherished, one that would endure long after personal grievances faded into history.